Imagine living in a place where stepping outside after sunset meant you might never return, where the darkness didn't just hide dangers, it was the danger. This isn't a horror movie. This is the true story of one of history's most prolific man-eating predators, a leopard that killed over 400 people. And unlike most animal attacks that happen by chance or desperation, this creature developed a taste for human flesh that would terrorize an entire region for years. The year was 1910. The place was Panar, in the Kumaon hills of northern India, and the nightmare was just beginning. Night fell over the village of Panar like a death shroud. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Men gripped their primitive weapons with sweating palms. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound could be the last thing you'd ever hear, because somewhere out there, in the impenetrable darkness of the forest, yellow eyes were watching, calculating, hunting. The Panar leopard had claimed another victim just the night before. A woman walking home from a neighbor's house barely 50 yards away. She screamed once, just once. By the time her husband reached the spot with a torch, all that remained was a sandal and a trail of blood leading into the forest. She was the 73rd victim that year, and it was only March. But here's what made this leopard different from any other man-eater in recorded history. It wasn't just the body count, though 400 victims is a staggering, almost incomprehensible number. It was the way it killed. Leopards are nature's perfect assassins. They're smaller than tigers, more agile than lions, and possess a stealth that borders on supernatural. An adult tiger weighs up to 500 pounds and makes noise when it moves. A leopard weighs 150 pounds and moves like smoke. It can scale trees carrying prey twice its weight. It can hide in spaces you wouldn't think possible. And this particular leopard had learned something that made it the most dangerous predator on Earth. It had learned that humans were easy prey. The attacks followed a pattern that defied all known animal behavior. This wasn't a sick or injured animal taking easy targets. Examination of the leopard after its death would reveal it was in perfect physical condition. This was a conscious choice, a deliberate hunting strategy. The leopard would enter villages at night, moving through settlements with hundreds of people, somehow avoiding every trap, every guard, every watchful eye. It would select its victim with precision, strike with lightning speed, and vanish before anyone could react. Witnesses who survived encounters described the same thing, a blur of spotted fur, eyes that glowed like lanterns in the darkness, and then nothing. The victim would simply be gone, dragged away into the night. Search parties would find the bodies, or what remained of them, sometimes miles away in the dense forest. The Kumaon region was being systematically depopulated by fear. Villages that had stood for centuries were abandoned overnight. Fields went unplanted because farmers refused to work them. Markets closed because merchants wouldn't travel the roads. The British colonial administration, which ruled India at the time, was at a complete loss. They sent soldiers, professional hunters, organized massive beating parties with hundreds of participants. Nothing worked. The leopard seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to evade capture. It would disappear for weeks, and just when people began to hope it had moved on or died, it would strike again. 3 victims in one night, 2 children taken from their beds, an elderly man attacked in broad daylight. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the physical attacks. People stopped sleeping. Families fought over who would keep watch. Paranoia set in. Some villagers began to believe the leopard was a demon, a shapeshifter, a curse from angry gods. Religious ceremonies were held. Sacrifices were made. Nothing changed. The killing continued, relentless and unstoppable, for 8 long years. In 1910, word finally reached a man who would become a legend. His name was Jim Corbett, and he was unlike any hunter the region had ever seen. Born in India to British parents, Corbett had grown up in these very forests. He spoke the local languages fluently, understood the culture, and possessed a knowledge of junglecraft that few could match. But what made Corbett truly exceptional was his approach to man-eaters. He didn't see them as evil. He saw them as animals driven to unnatural behavior by circumstances, usually injuries that prevented them from hunting their normal prey. He had already killed several man-eating tigers, earning him a reputation that spread across India. When the desperate villagers of Panar sent word begging for his help, Corbett initially hesitated. He was busy with other matters, but when he learned the full extent of the carnage, when he heard the number 400, he knew he had no choice. This wasn't just another case. This was potentially the deadliest man-eater in history. Corbett arrived in Panar to find a region paralyzed by fear. The stories the villagers told him seemed almost impossible. A leopard that had been killing for 8 years, a creature so cunning it had survived every attempt to kill it, victims numbering in the hundreds. Corbett was skeptical at first. Surely the number was exaggerated. Surely multiple leopards were being blamed on one animal. But as he investigated, speaking to witnesses, examining attack sites, studying the pattern of kills, he realized with growing horror that the stories were true. This was indeed one leopard, and it was smarter than any animal he'd ever encountered. Corbett's first challenge was gaining the trust of the terrified local population. They had seen so many hunters come and fail. They had watched the British authorities try everything and accomplish nothing. Why would this man be any different? But Corbett was different. He didn't arrive with an army of beaters and loud guns and colonial arrogance. He came alone, with his trusted rifle and an intimate understanding of how predators think. He spent days just observing, learning the territory, understanding the leopard's patterns, and what he discovered was chilling. This leopard was operating with a level of intelligence that bordered on human reasoning. It avoided poisoned bait. It detected and circumvented traps. It seemed to know when it was being hunted and would simply vanish until the search parties gave up. The leopard had learned to use the terrain to its advantage, striking in areas where pursuit would be difficult or impossible. It varied its hunting times and locations, never establishing a predictable pattern. This wasn't instinct. This was learned behavior. This was a predator that had been studying humans for 8 years, learning their habits, exploiting their weaknesses, perfecting its technique with each kill. Corbett realized he wasn't just hunting an animal. He was engaged in a battle of wits with a creature that had outsmarted everyone who had tried to kill it. Traditional hunting methods wouldn't work. He needed to think like the leopard, anticipate its moves, get inside its mind. He began his campaign by doing something unexpected. Instead of organizing large, noisy hunting parties that would alert the leopard, he moved alone through the forest at night. While villagers cowered in their homes, Corbett walked the same paths the victims had walked, deliberately making himself bait. It was incredibly dangerous. Leopards are ambush predators. They attack from behind, going for the neck or spine, killing before the victim even knows they're there. Corbett was betting his life that his jungle senses would give him the split-second warning he needed. For weeks, nothing happened. The leopard seemed to have disappeared entirely. Some villagers began to hope it had died or moved on. But Corbett knew better. The leopard was still there, watching, waiting, learning this new element in its territory. And then the attacks resumed. A man killed while relieving himself just outside his village. A woman taken while fetching water at dawn. The leopard was sending a message. It wasn't scared. It wasn't leaving. This was its territory, and humans were prey. After months of careful observation and mapping every known attack, Corbett finally identified a pattern. The leopard moved through a circuit of villages, never staying in one area long enough for hunters to predict its location. But there were certain routes it favored, certain types of terrain where attacks were more common. More importantly, Corbett noticed something others had missed. The leopard always had an escape route planned. It never attacked in areas where it could be trapped or cornered. It always struck near dense cover or rough terrain where pursuit would be impossible. This level of tactical thinking was almost unprecedented in a wild animal. Corbett began setting his own trap, not with bait or mechanical devices, but with patience and positioning. He identified a location where several of the leopard's preferred routes converged, a place where the terrain forced the leopard to pass through a relatively open area before reaching the safety of the forest. It wasn't much of an advantage, but it was something. He built a small machan, a platform in a tree, hidden carefully so it wouldn't spook the leopard, and then he waited. Hour after hour, night after night, Corbett sat in that tree in complete silence. Mosquitoes bit him, his muscles cramped, the cold of the high-altitude night seeped into his bones. But he didn't move, didn't light a fire, didn't make a sound, because he knew that somewhere out there the leopard was doing the same thing, waiting, watching, both predators, both patient, both waiting for the other to make a mistake. On the 14th night, as a thin crescent moon barely illuminated the forest floor, Corbett heard it. Not the leopard itself. Leopards move in complete silence, but the sudden absence of sound. The insects stopped chirping. The night birds went silent. Every creature in the forest sensed the presence of the apex predator. Corbett's heart rate didn't increase. His breathing didn't change. This was the moment he'd been training for his entire life. Every sense became hyper-alert. His eyes scanned the darkness, looking not for the leopard itself, but for movement, for the displacement of shadows, for anything that didn't belong. And then he saw it. A shape, barely darker than the surrounding darkness, moving with fluid grace along one of the paths he'd identified. The Panar leopard. After 8 years of terror, after 400 victims, after evading countless hunters and traps, it was finally there, in his sights. But Corbett didn't shoot immediately. He couldn't afford to wound the animal. A wounded leopard becomes even more dangerous, even more unpredictable. He needed a clean kill shot, which meant waiting for the perfect angle, the perfect moment. The leopard moved closer, completely unaware of Corbett's presence. It was a magnificent animal, powerfully built, its spotted coat perfectly adapted for the dappled light of the forest. In any other context, Corbett would have admired its beauty, its grace, its perfect adaptation to its environment. But this wasn't any other context. This animal had destroyed countless lives, devastated entire communities, brought unimaginable grief to hundreds of families. The leopard paused, exactly where Corbett had hoped it would. For a moment, it seemed to sense something wrong. Its head turned, those yellow eyes scanning the darkness. Did it see Corbett? Did it sense the danger? For a heartbeat, everything hung in balance. And then Corbett fired. The sound of the rifle shot shattered the silence of the night, echoing through the valleys. The leopard leaped, a convulsive movement, and then fell. Corbett didn't celebrate, didn't move from his position. He'd hunted enough dangerous game to know that even mortally wounded animals can kill. He waited, rifle ready, as the minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, when he was certain the animal was dead, he climbed down from the machan. With a flashlight, he approached the body cautiously. There it was, the Panar leopard, the man-eater that had terrorized an entire region for 8 years, the creature responsible for approximately 400 human deaths. It was over. When news spread the next morning that the leopard had been killed, the response was unlike anything Corbett had experienced before. Entire villages came out to see the body. People wept openly, not just with relief, but with grief for all those lost. The psychological trauma of 8 years of living in constant terror wouldn't heal quickly, but at least the immediate threat was gone. Corbett examined the leopard carefully, looking for the injury or deformity that usually drives predators to become man-eaters. He found nothing. The leopard was in perfect health, with no damaged teeth, no old wounds, no reason why it couldn't hunt its natural prey. This was the most disturbing discovery of all. The Panar leopard hadn't become a man-eater because it was forced to. It had chosen to. But why? Corbett spent considerable time investigating the history of the region, trying to understand what had triggered this unprecedented killing spree. What he discovered suggested a troubling possibility. 8 years earlier, around the time the attacks began, there had been an outbreak of plague in the region. Bodies had been hastily buried in shallow graves, or even left exposed, due to the overwhelming number of dead. It's possible that the leopard, then young and still learning to hunt, had discovered these easy meals. Human flesh had become associated with easy feeding. As the plague subsided and this food source disappeared, the leopard simply transitioned to hunting live humans. They were slower than deer, weaker than wild boar, and far less dangerous than the other predators in the forest. From the leopard's perspective, humans were the perfect prey. This theory, while unprovable, highlighted a disturbing reality. The relationship between humans and predators in India was changing. As human populations expanded into traditional wildlife territories, as forests were cleared and natural prey became scarce, conflicts were inevitable. The Pannar leopard might have been an extreme case, but it wasn't an isolated incident. Man-eating tigers and leopards were becoming more common across India. Corbett, who loved the forests and wildlife of India deeply, saw this tragedy from both sides. The humans who had suffered and died were victims of circumstance. But so, in a sense, was the leopard. The killing of the Pannar leopard made Jim Corbett famous throughout India and eventually around the world. He would go on to hunt and kill several other man-eaters, including the Champawat tiger, which had killed 436 people, making it potentially even more prolific than the Pannar leopard. But Corbett's legacy goes far beyond being a hunter. In his later years, he became one of India's first conservationists. He worked tirelessly to establish protected areas for wildlife, arguing that the real problem wasn't dangerous animals, but habitat destruction and human encroachment into wild spaces. He wrote several books about his experiences, but rather than glorifying the hunt, he wrote with deep respect for the animals and sympathy for the local people caught in these conflicts. The first national park in India was named after him, Jim Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand, where the Pannar region is located. Today, it's one of India's premier tiger reserves, protecting the very predators Corbett once hunted, but in a way that allows them and humans to coexist. The story of the Pannar leopard raises profound questions that remain relevant today. What creates a man-eater? Is it always injury or desperation, or can predators develop a preference for human prey through learning and experience? How do we balance human safety with wildlife conservation as human populations continue to expand into wildlife habitats around the world, from India to Africa to the Americas? These conflicts are becoming more common, not less. The lessons from Pannar echo in modern wildlife management. Today, when a tiger or leopard kills a human in India, wildlife authorities face the same difficult decisions Corbett faced. Do you remove the animal? Try to relocate it? Modify human behavior and settlement patterns? There are no easy answers. What made the Pannar leopard truly exceptional wasn't just the number of victims, though 400 human deaths is a staggering toll. It was the duration of the terror, 8 long years, and the calculated, intelligent way the leopard operated. Modern big cat researchers studying the behavior patterns Corbett documented have noted that the Pannar leopard displayed problem-solving abilities and adaptive learning that rival the most intelligent predators ever documented. It learned from its mistakes. It adapted to changing circumstances. It developed strategies specifically designed to hunt the most dangerous prey on Earth, humans. Consider the psychological horror of living under that threat. 8 years where every night could be your last, where stepping outside your home after dark was potentially fatal, where children couldn't play freely, where normal life became impossible. The economic impact was devastating as well. Agriculture collapsed as farmers refused to work the fields. Trade routes were abandoned. The entire social fabric of the region began to unravel. Some estimates suggest that the indirect deaths from starvation and disease caused by the collapse of the local economy may have equaled or exceeded the direct deaths from the leopard itself. Modern wildlife biologists have studied the phenomenon of man-eating extensively, and the case of the Pannar leopard remains one of the most analyzed. Several factors can contribute to a predator becoming a man-eater. Injury or disease that makes hunting normal prey difficult, old age and worn teeth, scarcity of natural prey due to habitat destruction, learned behavior, often from a mother teaching cubs. But the Pannar leopard fit none of these profiles. It was healthy, in its prime, operating in forests that still had abundant wildlife. This suggests a darker possibility that many prefer not to consider. Some predators may simply discover that humans are easy prey and develop a preference for them. It's not that they're evil or malicious, Those are human concepts. They're simply efficient predators making optimal choices. Humans are slow, weak, poorly armed, and often predictable. For a leopard that has learned to overcome its instinctive fear of humans, we become the ultimate convenient food source. This challenges our comfortable assumption that animals only attack humans as a last resort. The Panar leopard suggests that some predators can actively choose to hunt humans when given the opportunity. It's a humbling and unsettling realization. We like to think of ourselves as apex predators at the top of the food chain. But to a leopard that's lost its fear of humans, we're just another prey species, and not a particularly challenging one. What made Jim Corbett successful where so many others failed? It wasn't superior weapons or larger hunting parties. It was his understanding of animal psychology and his willingness to think like a predator. Corbett studied the leopard's kills meticulously, learning from each attack. He noted the times, locations, victim profiles, and escape routes. He built a psychological profile of the leopard, understanding it as an individual with specific preferences and learned behaviors, not just a generic predatory animal. He also understood something crucial. The leopard was studying him too. Every time hunters entered the forest, every trap that was set, every organized beating party, the leopard was observing and learning. It was adjusting its behavior based on human actions. This is why Corbett's solo, patient approach worked. He didn't try to force the leopard into a confrontation. He positioned himself where the leopard would naturally go, and then simply waited with more patience than the leopard expected. It was a battle of wills as much as a hunt. The other key to Corbett's success was his respect for the leopard. He didn't underestimate it. He didn't treat it as a simple animal operating on instinct. He gave it credit for intelligence, for learning ability, for strategic thinking. This respect made him cautious, careful, and ultimately successful. Modern hunters and wildlife managers still study Corbett's techniques. His journals and books serve as textbooks for dealing with problem animals. When the Panar leopard's body was displayed, Corbett spent hours examining it, trying to understand what had created such an efficient killing machine. The leopard was a male, approximately 8 years old, perfectly healthy, with excellent teeth and no old injuries. Its body showed the physical adaptations of a supreme predator: powerful shoulders for climbing and dragging prey, massive jaw muscles for the killing bite, razor-sharp retractable claws, and a flexible spine that allowed incredible agility. But it was the eyes that people remembered most. Even in death, they seemed to hold a calculating intelligence. Villagers who came to see the body often wouldn't look directly at the face, as if afraid the leopard might somehow return to life. The body was eventually buried, but its skull was preserved and became part of a collection documenting India's man-eaters. The estimated death toll of 400 people over 8 years averages out to about 50 people per year, roughly 1 person per week. Each of those 400 victims had a name, a family, a life cut short by a predator they never saw coming. Each death rippled through communities, creating waves of grief and trauma that lasted generations. To put this in perspective, the Panar leopard killed more people than most serial killers in human history. It operated longer and more successfully than almost any human criminal, and it did so while evading capture by authorities who were actively trying to stop it, something few human criminals manage. The story of the Panar leopard forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our place in nature. We've become accustomed to thinking of ourselves as separate from the natural world, protected by civilization, technology, and our assumed superiority. But in the forests of Kumaon in the early 20th century, that comfortable illusion was shattered. Humans became prey again, reminded that for most of our species' history, we were not apex predators, but mid-level omnivores, vulnerable to the true masters of the hunt. The Panar leopard represents the ultimate nightmare, an intelligent predator that has lost its fear of humans and recognized us as food. It's the monster under the bed made real, the shadow in the dark given form and substance. And unlike horror movie monsters, this one was real. It existed, it killed, and others like it exist today. As human populations continue to expand and wild habitats continue to shrink, encounters between humans and large predators are increasing worldwide. Tigers in India, lions in Africa, bears in North America, crocodiles in Australia. The potential for conflict is everywhere. The question isn't whether another man-eater will emerge somewhere in the world. The question is when, and whether we'll be ready to deal with it as effectively as Jim Corbett dealt with the leopard. The story should make us think about conservation differently. Protecting predators means protecting potentially dangerous animals. It means accepting a level of risk, managing conflicts intelligently, and respecting the power and intelligence of creatures that can kill us. It means understanding that saving nature isn't always cute and cuddly. Sometimes it's dangerous, sometimes people die, but the alternative, a world without these magnificent predators, is even more tragic. The leopard was an anomaly, an extreme case that hopefully will never be repeated. But it was also a window into the reality of nature, beautiful, brutal, indifferent to human suffering, and far more complex than we often acknowledge. 400 people, 8 years of terror, 1 leopard, 1 hunter, and a story that continues to captivate and horrify more than a century later, because deep in our primal brains we remember what it was like to be prey, and the leopard reminds us that we still can be.